Welcome back to the Daily Poem here on the Close Reads Podcast Network. I'm David Kern. Today is December 19th, 2019. The poem that I'm going to read to you today is by William Stanley Merwin, W.S. Merwin, an American poet who was born in 1927 and died in March of this year. He died on March 15th. He wrote many books of poetry and prose and also translation. He was the 1971 and the 2009 winner of the Pulitzer Prize and the 2005 winner of the National Book Award for Poetry. And in 2010, he was named the 17th United States Poet Laureate. The poem that I'm going to read today is called To a Leaf Falling in Winter. This is how it goes. At sundown, when a day's words have gathered at the feet of the trees lining up in silence to enter the long corridors of the roots into which they pass one by one, thinking that they remember the place as they feel themselves climbing away from their only sound while they are being forgotten by their bright circumstances, they rise through all of the rings, listening again afterward, as they listened once and they came to where the leaves used to live during their lives, but have gone now, and they too take the next step beyond the reach of meaning. So, as is customary with quite a bit of Merwin's poetry, there is next to no punctuation in this poem. The lines meander and twist about themselves. They interact in a sort of puzzle-like fashion, like almost like a weaving. If you're not careful, you don't know when a new thought is going to begin, when a new idea or a new image is going to separate itself from another image, when it's going to be sort of taking you somewhere new. And in that way, it's sort of like a root system, which is, of course, what this poem is referencing. There's this idea of the long corridors of the roots. And it's overly simplistic, I suppose, to put it this way. But one of the reasons that I like Merwin's poetry is because even though it can be a little dense at times, even though it can be demanding, I think is the better word. I don't think it's dense. Even though it can be demanding, even though it can ask you to pay close attention and make some leaps with him and trust him here and there, the things he's doing with line are so fascinating and have so much energy and are evidence of how much Merwin loved poetry. And it's overly simplistic to say, well, he creates these lines that twist together like a root system, and he's writing a poem about a root system, and so we have an objective correlative, a sort of formal linguistic, poetic objective correlative for the main theme in the poem. I mean, all of that's true, but it can also be sort of a simplistic way of putting it, I realize. But there's something sort of energizing about making an attempt to strip a Merwin poem down to its sort of bare necessities in terms of sentence structure, and then putting back in the lines that he takes you through, that he twists in there. And then you realize how much the poem and the idea itself that he's presenting can't be anything but what they are, how much they mean to the poem. So, for example, it begins, at sundown, when a day's words have gathered at the feet of the trees, lining up in silence to enter the long corridors of the roots. I mean, you could just stop and kind of leave off this middle part and go to the end. They rise through all the rings, listening again afterward as they listened once, and they come to where the leaves used to live. I mean, there is a sort of step-by-step sort of movement that's happening here. When the day's words going from one place to the other, so to speak. The day's words are gathering, they're lining up, they're entering, they're passing, they're remembering, they're feeling, they're being forgotten, they're rising, they're listening again, they're remembering again, they're going, and they're taking the next step. I mean, the words themselves are being personified. And it's not just then the idea that the lines twist together like a root system, and we have an objective correlative for that. But the words themselves here are coming alive. They're taking action. They're doing things. They're being given agency. And that in and of itself, that sort of, the spirit of that brings the poem alive itself. And it gives it some agency, and it sort of takes shape, and that's where the real movement and meaning of the poem happen. It's that it goes beyond the sort of obvious connection between the root system and the theme. The words themselves come to meaning through all that all those formal aspects. And I'm going on a little bit too long, a little bit longer than I typically do about this on some of these poems, but I just enjoy the way Merwin is able to endow his poetry with life that way. So here is Merwin's To a Leaf Falling in Winter one more time. At sundown, when a day's words have gathered at the feet of the trees, lining up in silence to enter the long corridors of the roots into which they pass, one by one, thinking that they remember the place as they feel themselves climbing away from their only sound, while they are being forgotten by their bright circumstances, they rise through all of the rings, listening again afterward, as they listened once, and they come to where the leaves used to live during their lives, but have gone now, and they too take the next step beyond the reach of meaning. This has been the Daily Poem. Thanks so much for listening. Be back tomorrow with another poem for you.